Вітаю в новому епізоді. Сьогодні ми говоримо з Юлією, активісткою, голосом United 24 Media Ukraine Briefly і ведучою подкасту Ukraine War Brief. Хоч Юлія і українка, цей випуск буде англійською, щоб нас почула наша американська аудиторія. Також доступні українські субтитри. Як завжди, збір буде в описі під відео. Тож не забудьте лайкнути, залишити коментар і підписатися. Приємного перекладу! Привіт усім і вітаємо в ще одному епізоді подкасту «Крапля Натхнення». Мене звати Михайло, і сьогодні I have two very exciting people. My співведучі today will be Dima. Today our guest is, which you probably recognize her, Yulia. So Yulia, we're really happy to have you here. Very excited. I'm very excited to have two English-speaking Ukrainians on the podcast. Usually I sit here in silence, but today I think we can all contribute a lot, and I'm very looking forward to this conversation.
You get to take out how long have these podcasts been going? Like a year or two?
Over a year.
Oh my God, we're going to have to put in a year worth of conversations that you didn't have.
I know. People are like, does he have personality? I don't know. He wears nice shirts. But yeah, I'm very excited. And Vitochka, I hope you get well. My normal co-host Vitochka is not here today because of a medical incident, so I hope you recover. And thank you, Dima, for bailing me out for the second time this year.
Yeah, Vitochka, we wish you speedy recovery.
We are at Bar San Miguel. Let's not forget about that. The best bar in Kyiv. I don't know if you've been here before.
Yeah, no one is pointing their gun at us right now at the moment. Yeah, okay. From the heart.
I want to know actually where you're from. Now I understand even the way you speak English, that you've lived in America for a long time, but where were you born and how long have you been living in America?
So I was born in Lviv, you know, Bandarstadt, Khokhlyandia, all of these fantastic names that the city has. But yeah, I was born in Lviv, born and raised there. I moved to the US when I was 16. The reason why I speak English, I guess, different than most immigrants would, moving at 16, is because I learned it in Ukraine when I was 4 from someone who didn't speak Ukrainian.
Wow.
Nice.
So it's kind of, it's like one of my first languages, I suppose.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I grew up with like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network and all of these things. So I moved to the US and I was like, homeland. It's a joke, but yeah, I do consider both like Ukraine and the US my home.
Okay, cool. Was it successful? You're running away from maybe the parents, not really running away, but you know, like being independent. And at what age were you? You said
super 16? Ran away from my parents. I mean, like I actually ran away from my dad. We have a fantastic relationship now. He watches every single one of everything I do, so I'm so sorry. But like I did run away from him. He's like a very good parent, but he's one of those parents who like loves you.
Yeah.
And he knows better.
Suffocating.
And, yes. And so like I basically lived in this like cage where, you know, I think I had my first sleepover at my like classmate's house at like 16 or like 15 or something.
Right before moving to the States.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And like, you know, I would go out to a cafe with my friends and my dad would like show up and he was like, oh, I was just in the area. And I'm like, it's a bar with like 14-year-olds.
So you took that concept of not sleeping at home
very seriously. Yes. So I decided like, I'm moving to another continent. Fantastic.
And how did you choose, in my opinion, the greatest city in the world? I know we're here in Kyiv, also the greatest city in the world, but I love New York. I love New York so much. And I could tell by the way you talked about it in previous like videos that you've been on that you appreciate it as much. How was the move? Because it's hard to move there.
So it's interesting because like honestly, I don't think I had a lot of like a culture shock or anything like that. I traveled a lot when I was younger. So it's like my parents did do that for me and I'm very grateful. So it's like I've been to so many different places before I ever moved to New York. Like, yeah, it was big. It had like all of these high rises, but so does London, right? So it's sort of like I'm so used to kind of absorbing new cultures and just understanding, or I was so used to it, and understanding that different people live differently and different cities are different, that like I was super happy about it. And Lviv was always very, very slow for me. So I was just kind of excited about like grumpy people and, you know, no one talking to you at coffee shops, like no one being nice, because I'm just like, wow, I could just run in, get a coffee, and run out, and I never have to see you again. Great.
Yeah, super busy city. And you studied there or here?
Yeah, I went to college in New York.
Okay.
And I went to college in the city, so that was an experience and a half. So yeah, I've literally been in New York for most of my US time. I did travel a lot around the US, and I lived in LA for 5 months, but we don't like LA, so we're not going to talk about it.
So that movie career didn't take off, yeah?
No. But if there's there's often this LA versus New York, I'm Team New York for 100%.
I am just like, it's not even Team New York versus Team LA, because most people who have that, it's like you live in LA and you have to say it, or you live in New York and you have to say it. It's like, I don't like the fact that it's not a city. It's a bunch of villages connected by highways.
Yeah.
Everyone like does cocaine. Everyone does like a copious amounts of drugs. No one has any concept of time, like whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's like someone is like, oh, I'm going to meet you in Malibu at 3 p.m. And it's like 6 and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just a little late.
Yeah. Traffic.
And it's like, dude, it's been 3 hours. I'm home. I'm like home in Ukraine now. Like, like we're not meeting. I'm sorry.
Having a car too is a requirement in LA, which
Yeah,
a luxury not to have in New York, I think.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, when people complain in New York, like, oh my gosh, he lives in Bushwick, I'm not going to date him because I live on like the Upper East Side. It's like, dude, in Los Angeles, like, if you have friends that live in the west part of the city and you live in the east part of the city, you'll never see them.
Yeah, long distance.
So, yeah,
Long
it's
distance.
like, there is a subway in New York. It takes 20 minutes. Like, shut up. It's not a long distance relationship. Just go take the subway and don't like, I don't know.
Yeah,
But yeah.
that's a good segue, because I do want to speak about, of course, and we won't stay on it too much, but these differences between like America and Ukraine. And well, I want to ask about dating, but even before that, we could talk about differences in food and health.
Oh yeah, many differences. I mean, I've said before, which you seem to have stalked online, but
I just did my homework.
Yeah, we like that.
I just remember when I first moved to New York, I went to like Whole Foods and I witnessed a conversation between 2 yoga girls, and they were like deciding whether they should buy mayonnaise because mayonnaise is bad for you because it's fattening, right? And this is like the rise of organic culture, okay? And this girl goes like, oh my God, it's organic, so it's good for you. And I'm like, I don't think you understand the difference between healthy and organic.
Yeah.
Like, organic mayonnaise is better than non-organic mayonnaise, but it's still a freaking, like, oil, carb, diabetes in a bottle. It's not good for you.
Fat, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, like, at first these things were, like, I remembered what good food was like, so I complained about the food in New York a lot, and then 13 years have passed, and I was like, no, America has fantastic food. I don't know why Europe is complaining. And then I came here, and I bought cucumbers. And this is like my favorite story to tell because cucumbers are supposed to be water. Like it's just supposed to be tasteless cardboard-like water. It isn't. It has flavor. Cucumbers have flavor, everybody, if you didn't know about it. And like my fridge, and I kid you not, if you walked into my apartment right now, I would have like 10 cucumbers sitting there and like 5 things of hummus. Because I just can't get over it. And I will never get over it.
You know what? Today, you'll be able to throw a good party to those cucumbers that have been sitting at home because we have something special for you.
Awesome. This is amazing. So, where are these from?
These are homegrown. And I actually, this morning, I've gone to my mother's garden and picked that for you.
Where is your mother's garden?
It's 25 kilometers away from Kiev.
Oh, okay. Well, I was about to be like, oh my God, oh no, you went all this way, but you know, it's fine.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
kidding.
also crazy.
This is very nice.
Yeah, right from the garden. And I mean, for me, I also think that's a crazy luxury to have. Even looking at them, they look different than what I grew up seeing cucumbers in my head.
Cucumbers in the U.S. are this big.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, that's a good size comparison for some things, not for cucumbers, because it's like they do not naturally grow that big.
Yeah, that's true.
No one injected nothing in those guys. Like, they did it all by themselves.
You know what? I'm going to try it.
I know. I want to eat some cucumber, too. Actually, I'm addicted.
There's a very good crunch to a cucumber.
Yeah.
They should have taste.
They do have taste.
How easy is it to break into your mother's garden?
Yeah.
It's not as hard. But I do have 2 dogs that will lick you to death.
I have a dog, she'll distract them.
Oh, yeah. So, that's a garden party.
Well, these are certainly different than what I grew up
these are so good.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, and this is not even for, like, you know, the shock value of the podcast. It's like a really good cucumber.
Yeah, I'll be munching on these throughout the podcast. But you get this every day. That's a luxury.
And it's always like a surprise because they do amazing job of hiding. And, like, well, you see, like, you look at, whatever, they not grow as bush, right? But they grow as like strains, right? And leaves. And like one moment you see nothing there, you just turn away, you face back, and there's a cucumber. It's like,
They're cool.
where have you been hiding?
I
Yeah.
want that. Can I just like look away and then I turn back and there's a cucumber?
If you look away now, then turn back, and I'm like a cucumber.
I mean, we can edit that in, I'm sure, somehow. That would be cool. Fun.
Actually, that'd be so
We-
funny.
we'll use all of our budget on special effects.
Yeah.
There is actually, so I'm sure you know who Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen are.
Mhm.
So there is a movie called The New York Minute, and one of their like movie boyfriends at the end of the movie is wearing a costume of a cucumber. So I'm sure we could Photoshop him there. So
Yeah. I don't know. Dima and I are the same age. I've learned it's not polite to ask a woman it's her age,
No,
which
I
is
don't
really
care.
crazy.
I'm
Looking-
turning 30 and
I think you are. Yeah.
in August. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you look great, first of all, because all the reference that you made with Mary-Kate Ashley Olsen, the Nickelodeon, Cartoon
Mhm.
Network, everything I grew up on
Mm-hmm.
and with, so it's really cool and relatable. Okay. Now I want to know about, we discussed a little bit about food, but then we were getting on this about, which I love, it's a New York joke about long distance dating, your bridge and tunnel. If anyone's like across the bridge, it's like, no,
No.
I can.
It's like I guess the left bank here is
Oh, yeah, yeah.
comparable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How was even dating in America like for you? Was it just a bunch of like, wow, all these guys are so different. They all wear hats. They all wear...
No, I mean, like, if I can go very inappropriate, there was only one situation in which I was, like, confused, right? Because, like, so I moved at 16, and I probably had, like, one sexual encounter before that, right? I was 16, and it
Yeah.
wasn't really, like, it was awkward, but it was there. And I moved to the U.S., and then that's where, like, my sex life started, right? And I just vividly remember staring at this man's penis and not understanding what's wrong with it, and then I see, yeah, and then, like, maybe 10 years later, I dated a European guy, and I was in the same, like, weird moment because then the tables have turned.
Yeah.
But so I guess that's, like, the only thing. But
So no
I'm-
turtlenecks.
Yeah, no turtlenecks, no helmets, no anything like that. I was like, is he healthy? I was like, that's not, it's not what
Wow, that is amazing. I'm glad that you said that. Like, here we have no filter. You can say anything. Later we can
Yeah.
cut whatever you don't want. But that's like an honest, that's a really...
I hope my dad is watching this.
No, I hope you did a good job. She's came back. Now you're in Kyiv, so Lviv, right? Where you're
Yeah,
are your
I'm
parents
from Lviv.
there?
Yeah, my parents are there. They never moved to the U.S. It was just me.
Yeah, just you. But then now you're living here in Kyiv.
Yeah, well, I came back to Lviv and I was like really energized to go live in Lviv. I was like, yes, my like hometown. I love Lviv. I do.
Yeah.
But then I realized that Lviv is about the size of my neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I
Yeah.
was like, this is not gonna happen. I saw my dad 7 times in one day unplanned, and I was like, so what's the apartment market like in Kyiv? And honestly, like I really love it here. It does remind
Okay,
me
cool,
of
yeah.
like New York when it started getting gentrified, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, like where all of these neighborhoods are starting to get their own sort of like crowd and character,
Mhm.
and it's big, and you can walk places, and then like, you know, you come back somewhere and there is a new cafe that you haven't seen. So it's sort
Yeah.
of like, it has a very New Yorky vibe
Yeah,
to me.
true. You
Mhm.
actually moved there then like 2011, 2012.
2011,
Wow,
yeah.
it's like 3 years, like 2 years before I moved there.
So I lived in the worst place on earth for most of my New York existence, or half of my New York existence. I lived in 42nd and 11th.
Oh, that's
So
terrible.
I had to go through Times Square every day,
Yeah.
but it was like a
Oh.
nice little oasis near the water, and it was sort of like very secluded.
That's true. Yeah. 11th
But then
time.
you, in order to get anywhere, you have to go through absolute hell.
Yeah.
I will never go to Times Square ever again.
That's crazy.
But then I moved to Brooklyn because my friend, who was like, I was such a city girl. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way I would ever move to Brooklyn. I would
Yeah.
rather live in like a really shitty pre-war Upper East Side apartment with like an
Yeah.
awkward bedroom that's
similar.
the size of a mattress. Then like go to Brooklyn. And then I moved with my best friend, and then I got this grandfathered lease in
Oh.
like a really nice former factory building, and
cool.
I have like a
Wow.
hallway, like a proper corridor
Yeah,
in Ukrainian,
hard
you
to
know.
find.
Yeah.
Huh.
And like it's like separate. I don't walk into my kitchen. There's like actually a ginormous hallway for no reason, and I pay like a 2003 price on it.
Oh, wow.
So I'm
Yeah.
a very Brooklyn girl now.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
What
never
is this
moving.
Bushwick? Is it Bushwick?
It's Williamsburg, actually. Mhm.
Okay. Wow.
I
That must
got
be
like
expensive.
incredibly lucky. No, it
Yeah,
isn't
that-
because I'm paying 2003 prices.
4 year. Oh, okay.
Like all
Yeah,
of
you
my
can have fun.
neighbors are paying like 3 times as much as I am.
That's crazy.
Which, like, if any of them are watching
Holy
me, I'm
shit.
so sorry.
Funny enough,
But
Williamsburg is the only like area that I know
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
Brooklyn, and I've never been to the States, but like I
very popular.
I watched a lot of like hipster skater videos, and Williamsburg seems to be some kind of like.
I was okay with hipster skaters. It's
yeah,
gotten worse.
But,
They opened in Hermes. Hermes basically bought a building on Bedford.
Really?
Like of Bedford, yeah, right near like Partners Coffee Shop, which used to be
Oh,
Toby's,
wow.
and now it's Partners. But
Yeah.
whatever, you know, like it's getting gentrified. But there is now going to be an Hermes HQ.
Wow.
There is now a Byredo store. There is a Chanel makeup store.
Really?
Yeah, it's like ridiculous. But
direction,
see,
damn.
like the worst part of all of it, and it's like I have nothing against Chinese people whatsoever, but I do have a lot against Chinese tourists because they have that one app where they like post a cool location, right? And because like there is ginormous amounts of population, and they travel
Yeah.
in groups.
Yeah.
And it's like suddenly if a billboard or a graffiti or something made it onto that like feared Chinese app, whenever they come as tourists to any country,
Yeah.
they come in these flocks and they all go to that one spot, and this spot is now Williamsburg.
Oh my
So
god.
I used to go get my morning coffee or my afternoon coffee. I work from home in like Williamsburg. I would have a walk with my dog. I'd be so happy. And now I'm just walking around people with selfie sticks
That's crazy.
that are like loitering around everywhere. And everyone is like so posh and with like their little Hermes bags because these are like, you know, these are
Yeah.
tourists with like money.
Money,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm just like, no.
there's something weird about how Chinese people take pictures, like with their like photos. Obviously, now it's selfie sticks, but once I stood next in Johannesburg, like outside Johannesburg in South Africa. I took like a trip to the national park to see lions and stuff, and I ended up standing next to a Chinese boy, like on this like bus with you know, like wired so that no one eats him, and he was just standing with his camera, and the whole time I was next to him, he didn't like take his finger off of the shutter.
Oh really?
So it was like for like 15
Every
minutes.
shot matters. Yeah. Every shot.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, that
Perhaps-
could go into even selfie culture.
But maybe he was doing like a stop motion. I don't know.
I think
Yeah.
selfie culture came from China, to be honest, because like
Yeah.
it might have been, but I think it's sort of like we look at it differently because it's not as like widespread where we are. But for instance, like in the US, right, like the culture of buying useless shit for your home on Amazon is insane.
Oh yeah.
It's
Okay.
like people come to my apartment and I realize just how bad this culture is ingrained in me when I moved to Ukraine, because my friends come in and they're like, you know, I would know that you moved from America. And I'm like, why? They're like, all this useless like shit
That's
around your
crazy.
place. And I'm like, what do you mean? I
Yeah.
really need my mini steamer for my
Yeah.
keyboard.
We were watching even Titanic the other day. My girlfriend, within they show like a inside shot of the woman in Titanic. So this is like 1997.
Mhm.
She's like, do all American homes look like that with all this stuff in there? I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, they do. If like hopefully.
But homes here, to me, like, especially the super newly renovated ones, they look so like, I know people want to make them stylish and stuff,
Yeah.
but they don't look lived in. And I thought,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
There's
like
a
so
sense, yeah.
minimal. And I want 55 paintings on my wall.
Yeah.
I want like, I don't know, my dog's paws there. I want a stupid freaking mini steamer for my keyboard. Why not?
Yeah.
Like it's $4.
What about carpets?
Oh, I do. I just got I just got a steam cleaner delivered from the US. Nova Posta Shopping. Big shout out. I have issues now. Not
Nova
now,
Posta,
but
contact
again.
us.
Oh
We
yeah.
could use some
Sponsorship.
integration.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
I would so like talk about them day and night. Like
For
if you
sure.
saw my Nova Posta like little scrolly thing, it like Posilka in New York, Posilka in New York, and I'm like, But so I got a steam cleaner, and I'm so excited about it. I've
Yeah.
steamed everything in my house. Like it's like every
Amazing.
single every
Wow.
baseboard, every like it's yeah, and I miss my little New York shopping culture, but I was trying or American shopping for home culture. But what I was trying to say about it is that I think in China that this same type of culture is for like little electronics for their phones
Oh,
and
yeah,
stuff.
Mm.
So it's sort of like, you know, we look at all of these like selfie sticks and all these
Mhm.
remotes for your phone and stuff, and we're like, what the is that? And they look at us without it and they're like, oh my God, what is this, 2001? I was like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. True. Back. When did you move back?
I keep thinking it's been 4 months, but it's been 7.
Okay.
January 1st.
Really? Of this year?
Well, actually, I guess like December 31st, yeah.
Ah,
Mhm.
nice.
Can you go back to February of 2022 Like when you've like first heard the news about the invasion, like the full-scale invasion. Obviously, it's been going on since 2014. Did you have that like urge to like go and do something?
I did. So I was in the process of my green card, and like the first thought that actually, like, after I stopped freaking out, and the first like reasonable thought that I had was like, what am I gonna do, because I can't go home? Because if I leave the US, I'm abandoning my application. And like I had a really difficult green card process. A company was supposed to sponsor me. They were never going to. They just wanted like very intense labor for the same price as everyone else. And they told me like 2 months before my contract with them was running out, and they were supposed to sponsor me. So I had like a really, really difficult journey with that. I haven't been home for 9 years because of all of my paperwork. And then like I'm sitting there, and my green card is like, I guess in this like stage where it's going to be done either tomorrow or like 2 years from now. You know, it depends on how fast they get to my application. And so I was like so excited. I was just talking to my dad a few days before that about like, oh yeah, but you know, like I'm in this like final stage of my application, so I'm going to be able to see you this winter. Or like we were planning like Christmas vacations and holidays like next year or something like that. We were like even talking maybe I would come home for my birthday in August. And then, you know, the invasion happens, and my first thought is like, I can't go home. Like I can't go to Ukraine and I can't do anything. My dad is of the draft age. At that point, my mom and her sister, who is my aunt, but in reality, their age difference is like huge. It's almost 20 years, and ours is like 9. So we're more like sisters. We grew up with all of the like annoying things where I stole her clothes and makeup and like, she loves talking about how I stole her underwear once, and like, yes, it was disgusting, but you know what? It was a Jean provocateur. So
kind of a thing like with big families, like especially after the Second World War.
What's mine is yours? No.
I mean, I had like, I was an uncle to people who were like 20 years older than me.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's actually really
like,
crazy.
Can I just call myself an uncle? But then, I had aunts that were like 1 year like older than me.
Or younger,
yeah.
I mean, I don't have that. My family is not like super large, or like the family that I talk to, that I grew up with, is like not really large, but my aunt is like my sister. And so her and my mom were stuck in Egypt because their flight back to Ukraine was supposed to be that morning, and obviously got canceled. And our only relatives are in Switzerland, which is like the most expensive country in Europe. All of their bank accounts are like frozen, right? No one can send any money anywhere. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, well, this is going to be expensive. And it was, but it's okay. Like I was super happy to like, I'm happy that at that time I had a good enough job that I could like immediately just be like, this is here, just do what you need to do. So they ended up being in Switzerland for like, I think 2 weeks or so. And then they went to Warsaw. And then they were like, you know what? We're just going to go back to Lviv and like get some stuff. And then we're going to go back to living in Warsaw. And I'm like, please don't, because you're never going to go back.
Yeah.
They never went back.
Really?
Yeah. They like crossed the border and they were like, yeah, no. So they stayed home, and I wanted
Lviv, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But at that point, there was like Belarus encroaching and stuff like that. So I wasn't too happy, because I genuinely thought that there's going to be an invasion from Belarus. My dad is of the draft age. So I was just sort of like really, I just wanted to go home. So basically I got my green card July 2023, and I came to Ukraine August 2023.
Wow. Okay, so you were really waiting.
Oh no, like I got it, and I like went and booked a flight that I could afford
that's
immediately.
crazy.
I was like, once the first day that the flight is not like $1,500. Like,
That's crazy. And so actually that whole time from 2012 to 2020, like 10 years or whatever, 9 years you said?
So I was in New York for 13, and I wasn't home for 9, since 2014. Actually, like the last time I was home is when Maidan was happening.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like I was in the air when students were being beaten up. I was coming back to take.
Like Yulia visits home only when shit's.
I do. It's like shit
Most
goes
people
down,
leave,
and I'm like,
that's amazing. Well, there's two parts of that. It is amazing that you came back, but even that process to get your documents in America is just like really crazy.
Yeah.
And like you had to endure all that. I'm glad you have it now, though, right? So you could go back.
Yeah, I have to in September in order to like, well, first of all, keep my green card, and also because like I still have like a big chunk of my life in the U.S. And people constantly ask me like, oh, have you moved for good? And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know anything. Like I
Wow,
moved,
crazy.
I want to be home, and that's like as far as I know. Am I planning on moving back in the near future? No. Am I planning on giving up my New York apartment in the near future? Also no, because I'm never going to be able to afford to live in New York if I
don't
give
give
up the
that
apartment.
up.
Yeah. So it's like I don't know. I'm just sort of in this like limbo where I don't want to be anywhere else,
Mhm.
but I also like obviously, you know, it's 13 years of my life, and most of that life was like when I was an adult. So or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
becoming an adult. So technically, like I grew up in America.
Yeah,
You know.
for sure.
So,
And so with that, like, well, first of all, so you've been living here for like 7 months.
Yeah.
But I've known of your videos and the content that you produce for much longer. So how, which is awesome, first of all, that you can do that, and you did do and do create content, and you can do it from wherever. But how did that begin, and where do you work now?
buckle up, Buttercup. But like, I'll try to make it like as short as I can, because I feel like anytime anyone asks me this question, I'm like, oof.
Yeah, true.
But you have this urge in 2022 to kind of apply yourself somehow.
It was basically like if I was able to go back home, I would have been like, you know, at volunteer centers. Like at some point actually I wanted to get combat medic certified and trained. My knees are garbage. I can't run. I used to run, like, and I killed them with soccer. It's a whole different story. But like I probably.
What's your favorite team?
For soccer?
Yeah.
It changed. I grew up with like it being Manchester United.
I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, see, no one likes it, but it's fine. But it's like it's been, you know, it's been. I'm not one of those people that just has like one thing and never changes their opinion. I'm also a really bad fan, so it's like it's changed a couple of times throughout.
Karpaty, no.
No, because and you know why? Because I almost got fungus from players of Karpaty when I was a kid, because they used to go to this pool, like private pool called Sophia, and I did too.
Oh.
And they, because their feet, you know, and yeah.
Once
there was a fungus outbreak.
So I'm originally from Mariupol, and like the football team was owned by the Illich plant, and my father would work at the plant as well, and somehow we one day just visited to grab a car for his errands, and there was like this bus that team would use. So I was super small, and the driver of the bus would let me like to walk up and down the bus, and it stinked so bad. So I'm with you on that. Like probably I got fungus like just in my nose just from strolling up and down the bus.
I was a UX designer. I was a creative director. I was working in this app at the time, and I ended up quitting my job, and I ended up doing like TikTok and Instagram and all of this full time, even though it wasn't like, I didn't even, at that point, the question of money wasn't even there. I looked at my savings. I was like, I have enough to survive a year if I like really buckle up. And I was like, I'm doing it because I genuinely, like, I felt so guilty that I can't be home, and I just wanted to do things. And I guess, like, I've always been super into geopolitics and, like, politics in general, not into geography so much, but into geopolitical dynamics and history and things like that. And so I was like, okay, what can I do? And I'm like, I can talk, and I can tell people these things that I know. So that's sort of what I was doing, and that's how I like applied myself. And then I realized that as like someone, I'm very logical in that way. It's like easy for me to explain how we arrive from point A to point B with like simplifying it. And that's what I was sort of doing with a lot of like troll narratives and stuff like that. And it was catching on, and people were actually understanding it. So I was really happy.
So it's like design thinking, right?
Yeah.
Being a UXer.
Yeah, because a UX designer, it's like
you
you
got
get
the left
flow.
and right
Yeah,
part.
well,
We studied psychology. We're just flexing that we research.
I'm like, you know me better than I do.
It's actually awesome, but that is that, and you applied both of that, and your videos have caught a lot of traction because of that. And so before that, you didn't have any experience making such videos. Okay.
I actually like, this is a very funny thing, because you know, sometimes you sit with your friends and they're like, would you want to be famous, right? Or like, what would you do if you were famous? And like my biggest, not even fear, but like one thing I never wanted is my face to be like famous or like recognizable, because I'm just like, it's so bad. Like, you know, people look into your cup of coffee, people like look you up on the internet, people like tell you these things about yourself that are not even like, they don't know you, right? But they like think they do.
They think that they know you.
And then like, and then I ended up doing exactly that, where like my face is literally center part of everything. And also I used to be so bad with videos. Like I have severe body dysmorphia because I have a thyroid issue, like it's hypothyroidism. So sometimes I'm like at my normal weight and sometimes I just gain 30 pounds out of nowhere. So I never liked video because with photos, it's like you can sit sort of the way that you like it and then like you look the way that you like it. And then on video, it's just like, that's not a thing. And I am not the type of person to like edit videos or like, you know, make myself look the way that I don't look. So at the first couple of like months, I guess, it was so freaking weird. I'm like, there are all of these people watching me stand in my bathroom and talk about Ukraine. Like, what is happening? So but I got used to it. Now I don't necessarily care. You know?
For sure.
There's that line in the Tyler, the Creator album, Igor, thing you are running from, you end up chasing.
Oh, wow.
Kind of sums it up for you.
What I also really like about you, as I understand, is that you classify yourself as someone that's sharing information. It's strange. Like I do like creative stuff, so always performing music, comedy. So farthest thing from journalists. And since this war began, or even before that, but now there's a rise of a lot of people who are reporting information. Journalists, maybe journalists. My friends that are trained journalists question their integrity, but then they're also this bridge between influencer, which I heard you say that you don't like that, which I respect because like I don't understand that like if you report news, then I'm
not influencing anyone, right? It's like I'm not selling people makeup, and there's like nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to be like you know, disparaging or derogatory to people who do. It's just like I think influencers are people that influence you to buy things. Like I'm also not trying to necessarily like influence your opinion. I think I'm always very careful not saying I'm a journalist. I say I'm a reporter because I think journalists are more of like you have your own stories, you investigate things, and like I report on the situation. And you could, I guess, classify journalism as in like explaining dynamics, and like if anything, I'm a political commentator in that way, right? So I would say that, but I find it so incredibly annoying, and I think this is going to be like the people that do that. And if you are the person who's going to get offended at what I'm going to say next, then you definitely do that.
For sure.
English-speaking people who live in Kyiv run around in a freaking helmet.
So many.
Around Kyiv. And like take photos and videos of like, I don't know, explosions and events and stuff like that and go, I'm a reporter. I'm a journalist on the scene. You're not.
Oh, it's so bad.
You're not. And it's like, it's offensive to the people that are journalists. Like I'm friends with a lot of journalists
100%.
and they went to college for this. Like these are people with an actual,
trade.
Like, it's like, I may be like a video reporter. I may be a person who like does political commentary, but I would never in good conscience sit there and like be like, oh, I'm a serious journalist. Like I have a journalist ID. I'm applying for a military like press pass, right? Because that gives me, access to these things, but also like I work with journalistic outlets. Like I've worked with Sodomia, I've worked with United 24, and now I'm working with this new project, which we might talk about later. But it's sort of like I'm at least trying to get to the level where journalists would not feel weird next to me saying that I am a journalist, right?
Sure.
But until that happens, I would never freaking stand there and be like, hi, I am Yulia, and I am a journalist on the scene. Let me give an interview to some random Australian news outlet and say that I've been reporting in Ukraine since the full-scale invasion. Like, dude, or ma'am, whoever you are, like, please stop doing that.
It's
just
crazy because
say you're a content creator.
We just met like on this podcast, but I think we know and have the same feelings about similar people.
It's ridiculous, and it's like it hurts me for my friends that are actually professionals,
for sure,
right?
Me too.
And it's so misleading too because you're a content creator. Like you're a content creator, and even if you reached out to a bunch of like news outlets and like got a job creating content for them, you're not a journalist. You're a content creator,
and it's still helpful to Ukraine in many ways, and that's why I don't like really fire at them, but I have
but
like a
that's, like-
backlog of so many stand-up comedy jokes that I'm just attacking these people but what they do, I don't do. I respect people's ballparks
But it's
and
because
everything.
there's so many foreigners in this country that are genuinely like very helpful and they're doing amazing stuff and they get overshadowed by
Yeah.
these like ridiculous people that clearly just want to be famous on the internet,
Yeah.
but they think the word content creator is like beneath them or something or doesn't give them enough value, and because they talk about Ukrainian things they call themselves journalists. Like, you're not.
Yeah.
You're a content creator and it's okay and it's still
It's-
helpful
yeah,
to
embrace
Ukraine.
that.
It's still
Yeah.
good, but embrace it.
Yeah.
Like, stop trying to like put yourself in a niche of something you aren't.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
like
so
if you've made a
crazy.
political video or two in the lifetime of your account, that doesn't make you a journalist.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
So much respect for that sentiment, and I've agreed with that. Yeah, I've
And
been
shout
voicing my
out to
opinion.
content creators who took it
Yeah,
upon
for
themselves to explain,
Yeah.
because like from the initial like hours of the invasion, and I
Yeah.
wasn't home. I was on my way to Odessa for
That's
a
yours.
Thank you.
I love that. I
did
knew
not
when there was
wanna
one
interrupt
left,
you.
and they're so good. Thanks also.
Enjoy. There's gonna be more. And yeah, I mean, I was blessed with the education where I learned English in school and away from school, but never been to States. But as Julia, I was growing up watching Conan O'Brien and all the late night TVs, and then obviously Friends and How I Met Your Mother, so all those shows, and I've kind of felt like I was this like enclave of the American culture in my hometown. So the natural thing for me was to kind of translate the news, and then we saw that there's like a huge gap in how Western society perceives Ukrainians. So it came organically and naturally to kind of explain that, so it's not Kiev and Rus, it's just Rus. So that was the start for me. Then ever since COVID hit, I was planning to kind of, you know, like translate and do voiceover of the like American YouTube videos into Ukrainian, and I never actually got to do that. But funny enough, on the 22nd of February, the last public address by President Zelensky wearing a suit. So I decided, okay, so I'll translate what he said into English.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my start. So then I was invited into the With Ukraine Instagram account.
Oh, amazing.
And like I think in 1 week we've gained like from 3,000 followers almost 400,000, and that was what,
Because
like
people were looking for information about Ukraine,
a lot.
It was a surge, it was
and
such a
also
surge.
it kind of showed me that the number of followers matter, because it started to open doors, and like all of a sudden we could access people in the UK, in the US. Like we could access the Ukrainian's ambassador's office for a commentary, and that like all because there was urge and there was like skill that was kind of sitting idly in me, but then and the whole like group with Ukraine, we had over 80 people in all of the time belts, time zones of the world. All of them Ukrainians, but with a little bit of help by Americans, like on the later stages. Not specific to Ukrainians, but the sense of justice kind of prevailed in us at that point. So we decided that it's time to shout like as loud as we can, just to kind of make Ukraine's voice heard. And if it wasn't for people like you, me, the other people who volunteered to kind of disseminate information, I don't know if we had like that help that was coming into, that started to come into Ukraine like in March and April of 2022. So and still we cannot abandon that. Like if you stop talking, people just move forward.
That's sort of like the thing. It's like there were so many people just like willing to use any skill they had to help Ukraine, and that's so admirable. Like I love it. Also, like all of the videos from all of the content creators that we've just mentioned, like they've helped us so much because in reality, like most Americans watch Americans in Ukraine. They don't watch Ukrainians in Ukraine, right? Most Canadians watch Canadians in Ukraine. So every single one of these content creators is like incredibly important for this country to keep staying in like the headlines, to keep staying in people's minds, for people to keep liking it. Like, so it's like there is absolutely no shade to what they're doing. What they're doing is great. It's just like the shade is only for stop calling yourself a journalist, because like, you know, your work and what you do is important. Just embrace the content creator thing. And I think it's like, if you can do videos, if you can explain things, it's fantastic. But when you blur that line of journalism versus like, oh, this is my personal opinion and this is just like, you know, my content and stuff, you end up speaking to foreigners on behalf of Ukrainians when you're not Ukrainian. And that's like one thing that I guess I find a lot on the internet, where like it doesn't matter how long you've lived in Ukraine, unless you've had the Ukrainian experience of like having to deal with Russia, unless your parents have been slaughtered, unless your grandparents have been slaughtered, you don't necessarily get the situation of like, it's not that you don't have a right to explain it to people. You do. Like, you have a right to talk about Ukrainians and Ukrainians having like, thank you, you should. Like, we so appreciate that. That's not what I'm trying to say. I guess like I'm trying to be very careful here. But it's like, as a white person, you cannot talk about African American experiences or Asian American experiences because you don't experience them.
Right.
So it's like, as a Canadian, American, Brit, Australian in Ukraine, when you create these channels and you start talking about Ukraine and how we should treat Russia and how Russians are not that bad or something like that, as like an opinion in Ukraine, you are literally being a white person talking about what it's like to be black, which makes no sense, right? Because you can't be an American talking about what it's like to be a Ukrainian and how a Ukrainian feels about Russians and why this invasion is so important, why it's so important to like push them out of like the world scene, right? Because we know what it's like. We've been through it. And like, you guys are just dipping your toes into it, you know?
You can make decisions based off that, because like, when parts of my family was either slaughtered or deported, I mean, it's almost impossible for me to fall for Russian propaganda. And it's not acceptable for me to, sorry for tautology, to accept the terms that to the outer world seem like, well, that's okay. You just sacrifice part of your territory. Like, no. We have sacrificed enough.
And it's not even like, you know, it's these like kind of like, I wouldn't call them microaggressions because they're not aggressive, but it's like these micro influencing things, right? So it's sort of like, well, but at some point you're going to have to talk to Russia. You're neighbors with them. At some point you're going to have to develop a relationship. Like, no, we don't. We've done that over and over and over again. Like, I'm sure people during Holodomor were sitting there and being like, we are never going to let these people over our border again. And then everyone collectively forgot, because I'm sure there were like other countries like Belarus or someone else next to us who were like, oh, but they're your neighbor. At some point you're gonna have to have a relationship with them. North Korea has neighbors. No one has a relationship with them. So like, why is it that we are being forced by like, you know, by people from other countries to have a relationship with Russia at some point when the war is over? Like, first of all, like, are you going to have a relationship with someone who raped your sister? I don't think so. Even if they're your neighbor and like they're not moving anywhere and now they're a sex offender living next to you. Like, you're not going to have a relationship with them just because you have to. So it's like, why do we have to? And I think that like one of the things that can be misleading but like not necessarily planned is when like content creators talk on behalf of Ukraine, their own opinions. And that's where like being a journalist and being a content creator is very different, because like I think journalism is based on a lot more research, and you are sort of like talking on behalf of like a research contingent, right? That would be Ukrainians. And when you're a content creator, you're talking on behalf of your friends, people that you have interacted with. And that's like where I think that line is.
So what should be the way, like, for content creator that is not of Ukrainian origin, right? Kind of to give voice to those who he or she knows. to like locals?
I think like one of the things that we kind of don't do because we assume that people understand it's our own opinion, right? Is like, I think if you're expressing an opinion like that, first of all, you have to stress so many times that it's your opinion based on your experience with your friends in Ukraine. And then say that if you want to hear what Ukrainians feel like in Ukraine, then go watch this or that creator. Or like, hey, I have a friend here who has an opinion. And like also it's very, especially like one of the things that like really bugs me is like when content creators who are foreign will find like a one-off Ukrainian that has an opinion that's like slightly different than most people, and they're like, well, this Ukrainian thinks that's why, like, see, I told you this is right. And it's like, dude, you and I both know that this girl has an opinion that most Ukrainian would like put her on an electric chair for. Like, please stop using that as like an example, you know?
Also, I'd like to put forward that notion that this territory has been under the Soviet occupation for too long.
Yeah, and a lot of people.
Generations changed, and people were born in under occupation. They didn't call that because the media was controlled, the policy was controlled, so kind of a lot of people were born into the occupation, and they normalized that for them.
I think like one of these examples is like the Ukrainian-Russian language debate, and a lot of people putting their Ukrainian friends who speak Russian and being like, well, see, they speak Russian and this isn't okay to speak Russian, and they think it's okay to continue speaking Russian. But it's like, the people that think it's okay to continue speaking Russian and teaching their kids Russian are literally victims of Russia. And you are like, this is not, you shouldn't be perpetuating these ideas. And I guess like that's where, you know, it's like a very fine line between talking about your life in Ukraine as a foreigner and talking about Ukraine and political dynamics in Ukraine. I genuinely think that honestly the socio-political dynamics in Ukraine should be discussed by Ukrainians. It's like I got yelled at by, and I'm not going to name this person by any means, it was like a very weird experience for me, and I personally, like, they're a foreigner, and I guess like they're from this type of country that if I said where they were from, I'm pretty sure there's one of them here. So I got yelled at, like, unprompted. I was putting flowers to my friend's, like, brother-in-arms memorial because I saw that the flowers were, like, dead. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to go get new flowers because I know this person is going to appreciate it. I didn't know the person there from Azov, but I know they're a good friend. And I've heard about them so many times from that person. And I, like, said, like, hey, guys, I want to go get flowers, whatever. So everyone knew that this was, like, an important thing for me. And we were walking with a bunch of my friends and like this person and their wife, and they said something about like Ukrainian language, and then they used a Russian word, and I was like, oh, but that's not Ukrainian, that's Russian. And it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't anything like, oh, but that's not Ukrainian, that's Russian. It was like, oh yeah, but like, I mean, I see what you're saying, but the example you're using is not Ukrainian, that's Russian, and I think it's important to differentiate. And at that point, and I know they have PTSD because they do evac from like front lines, they literally lose their shit.
Oh wow.
And they start telling me that since I haven't evacuated anybody from the front lines or haven't been to the front lines, I shouldn't have any opinion on what language, you know, Ukrainians are supposed to be speaking, or like what language Ukrainian people are supposed to be speaking, or their kids are supposed to be speaking, and that like it's fucking fine, and everyone should be speaking whatever language they want, and Russian is fine, and that they evac people from, you know, frontline territories that speak Russian, and that like a lot of Ukrainian soldiers speak Russian and all of this, and it's like, dude, yes, you do a fantastic job and you help us in like a capacity in which very few people can. But the thing is, if anything goes south, you pack your little passport and your wife and you go to the country where you came from. For your children, they're not going to be just Ukrainian. Your children are going to be Ukrainian / wherever it is that you're from. So if your children get like, you know, occupied or any of this stuff, you are not fucking Ukrainian. Like the thing is that it doesn't matter how many people you've evac'd from the front lines. You don't get to have an opinion on this because it doesn't concern you. It doesn't concern you. Like it's not something that you've lived through. It's not something that you've like experienced. It's not something where like I, as someone who is primarily Ukrainian speaking, who went to Zaporizhia at age like 14 and was like, and people were telling me to speak the normal language. And to me, it was like, I did not understand what do you mean by the normal language. Like my grandparents speak Russian, so I grew up with Russian in my house, which was like a very weird thing for Lviv, right? So I knew Russian, so it's not like I'm this like, Bandera child who was just like, oh, screw Russia. Like, no, I was just confused because I'm in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Russian is the language across the border. What do you mean? Like, to me, it was such a like crazy realization when I started going outside of Lviv to like Kyiv and other places that everyone spoke Russian and somehow Ukrainian wasn't normal. Like, you didn't go through that.
Yeah.
And for you, it's not like an existential question. Your parents didn't go through that. Your mom didn't decide to teach you Russian because she was like, well, it's not like you're going to live in Lviv forever. Like I was very curious why like my mom kept talking Russian to me because my dad is like Ukrainian speaking. I went to Ukrainian school. Like, why was Russian even like a thing, And she was like, well, you're going to go to school somewhere, right? And you're not going to be in Lviv. So you need to know Russian.
That's crazy.
And she told me this like a year ago because it was like something that I never thought about. So it's like for you to yell at me, especially at my friends, at like a friend of mine's memorial, to tell me that I'm not worthy of an opinion on the language in my country because I haven't evac people from the front lines, like, that's a savior complex. And I'm going to, like, give this person a benefit of the doubt because they did have severe PTSD, and I've heard through, like, the grapevine that they did go home and, like, tried to treat it and stuff, but it's like, that is not okay. And when foreign people come here and start telling Ukrainians what we're supposed to do because these foreign people are at the front or evacing people or things like that, it's like, do you understand what you're doing? You're doing what Russia is doing because you're like, oh, now I am doing this for you. So now you have to use my opinion. It's like, dude, you're helping us fight for our principles. And our principles, even if like these people are at the front, and especially if you're evacuating people from the frontline territories, most likely they were told their whole life that Russian is the only language that they should be using because Ukrainian is for uneducated rednecks. And that's why they speak Russian, okay?
You'll advance nowhere if you don't know Russian. You'll have
But that's
job.
the thing, it's like my mom, literally, she was like, it's not like you're going to be in Lviv forever,
That's crazy. Because we've never met prior, but like American, I moved to Kyiv 2019, but then before war, I moved to Lviv to improve my Ukrainian. So I put out like a music album in Ukrainian. This is all before war, which means for me it was all very unsuccessful because it was not so popularized. But I've avoided this like what people should speak because I've seen criticism. I just really like Ukrainian language, and I was always, my thing was like I want to make content, so Крапля Натхнення, comedy, music, all in Ukrainian, knowing that I'll never grow big. And then now this is popularized, and that's really cool. But like, I've always felt like I still have no opinion on this. I'm not Ukrainian. So I just chose a language. I do that. Similar to what you say, because I've heard this from so many sides about language. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting to have both of you because before today, I didn't know you're from Lviv. I know you're from Mariupol. And so, but I know that you guys feel very passionately, similarly about this same topic.
It's that kind of thing where, like, I'm not the kind of person who's going to yell at somebody for speaking Russian, right? Like, my grandmother speaks Russian, and, like, honestly, let her speak more Russian than Ukrainian because she sounds like Azarov.
She's in her 80s, right?
I think Azarov sounds better than she does in Ukrainian. But so it's, like, kind of, like, she tries, and she does a very good job, and I'm, like, very appreciative. But, like, she's in her 80s, like, and she's spoken Russian her whole life, so it's fine. Where I do draw the line is when parents decide to teach their children Russian. Like, I get into my elevator every single morning. There's a kid who's this big, and he goes, "Здрасте." And I want to like you are consciously, you can talk whatever language you want. Like, I mean, if you don't understand why Ukrainianizing the society is important, then that's an issue. But like, if it's difficult for you and you are trying, it's great. If it's difficult for you, you're in your 80s, no one expects you to switch to Ukrainian. It's okay. Like, you've also already raised your kids and you already did that. It's not like you have a lot more to contribute, but it's like in like the Ukrainization sense, right? But if you're a parent of a young child and you choose to talk to that child at home in Russian, what you are doing is that child is going to grow up in the Russian info space with Russian YouTubers, Russian TV shows, dumbass papины дочки, dumbass like, I don't know, what else was that TV show? Yeah, exactly.
It physically hurts me.
Yeah,
to,
like Моя
just
прекрасная
to
няня and all of
about-
this stuff,
yeah,
where
oh my
Ukrainians
God.
are being depicted as these like rednecks who are worth nothing. Like people from Kharkiv are being depicted as like people who have never seen washing machines, and people from Moscow are being depicted as like what we should all strive to. And you're consciously doing that to your kid. If your kid did not know Russian, it's like, the thing is, it's an egotistical choice because you're like, oh, but it's easier for me to speak Russian. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
That's exactly why you're doing it. But it's easier for you to let your kid grow up in a world in which he's exposed to all of this garbage all over again, and we are in this situation again in 100 years, than it is for you to shove your ego up your ass and start talking Ukrainian to your child.
Right.
Even if it's broken Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, if they know Russian, they're gonna like not scroll through Russian content, because they're not gonna be looking like whether it's from Russia or from Ukraine. It's like someone speaking Russian, they understand that language, so that invites all of this stuff into their brain.
Yeah.
But if they don't speak Russian and they don't understand what this person is saying, they just keep scrolling, and their content is Ukrainian, English, French, whatever it is. So it's not like, for me, it's not like oh, you're an asshole for continuing to speak Russian. Like, no, you're an asshole for being such a selfish dick that you are teaching your kids Russian because it's easier for you.
Yeah.
Newsflash. As a parent, you're supposed to think of things that are better for your children in the long run.
Yeah.
You have kids only when you can put your children first. If you can't so little as start teaching your 2-year-old to speak Ukrainian in everyday life, then you shouldn't have had kids to begin with, because you're not putting your kid 1st. You're putting your like, oh, it's easier for me
Yeah.
first.
You're also inviting genocide 20 years
Yeah.
from now.
Yeah.
Because like in 20, 30 years, your kids will be grown enough to make decisions. Some of them will grow up to be a great politician, and you have that as a background. And like, it's normal for them to be, again, talking to Russians. And essentially, when you do that, you just invite more
Yeah,
genocide
that's true.
onto this land.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think, honestly, this is my personal experience, and I wrote, like, a little Medium piece about it. I don't know if I've ever talked about it in an interview, because, honestly, it, like, makes me ashamed of what it was like, but I'll say it because I think that's a very good perspective on how rotten Russian is, right? I grew up in Lviv, and people normally think that, like, I've never had these, like, experiences, and who am I to speak? It's easy for me to speak Ukrainian. I was always, like, in a Ukrainian environment, and I was always, like, this proud Ukrainian speaking Ukrainian. Like, no. So my grandparents and my mom spoke Russian. Now she speaks Ukrainian to me, but that entire part of my family spoke Russian. In my kitchen, there was this dynamic. I turn to my dad, I speak Ukrainian. I look back at my mom, I speak Russian. I have never in my life spoke to my dad in Russian or to my mom in Ukrainian, which is why it's easy for me to switch in between languages. So my grandparents, my grandfather is a professor, and so when I started learning Russian, and I'm like, I'm an anal person, so I have to do everything right. So when I started learning Russian, I wanted to, like, write it right. I wanted to, like, speak it right. So he would always correct me from h to g. So by the time that I was in high school, I spoke like this sort of St. Petersburg Russian, where Russians couldn't tell I'm from Ukraine. And it was like a fun little game to play with with the people that I've met in New York, who would be like, oh, guess where she's from? And they would, like, guess these, like, Russian cities, right? And then they would be like, oh my God, she's from Lviv.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, this was the level of Russian. So in, I think, 10th grade or 11th grade, this is where, like, the trauma comes in, right? We had a foreign literature class, and we got to these, like, Russian writers, right? And most of the kids, it's Lviv, do not speak Russian.
Yeah.
Like, if they speak Russian, it's broken Russian. If they speak broken Russian, then they have, like, a Ukrainian accent, the one that Russians like to make fun of, right? And my foreign literature teacher, I think she either spoke Russian at home or she was from Russia or something like that, but she had this, like, thing for proper Russian. And so she would give us an option of learning Russian poems translated into Ukrainian or in the language of the original. If you learned them in the language of the original, then you would get a higher grade. But you would only get a higher grade because you had to recite the poems, right? Like, everyone does that. It's a normal, like, high school experience. So but you could only learn them and recite them in Russian if you didn't hekate or shokate, which is like the, you know, that like sound that Ukrainians often
That's abuse
mispronounce.
right there.
But that's exactly it, right? And like there were 2 kids in my class who could do that. One of them is Georgian Ukrainian, and he spoke Russian at home, and me, because I spoke Russian at home. Everyone else does not speak Russian at home. I don't know any other kids in my school, for that matter, not even my class, my school, that spoke Russian at home. It's Lviv. And so I went and learned that poem in Russian, and I was the only one. And I because the other kid like was not going to learn poems to begin with, but like, but I recited it, and I got a really high grade. And I remember coming home and thinking that I'm so superior than all of my classmates because like, I mean, I speak fluent Russian and like I speak it right, and like, how can they not, like, what is it that difficult to learn it in the same way as like, you know. And I remember like telling my mom about this, and she was like very proud that I like could do it in Russian, right? And then I was telling my dad about it, and he was like, my dad's like the kind of guy where like he wasn't, in certain things he was like very much like, no, that's not okay, Yulia. And in certain things he was just like, I don't even know how to begin to address it, right?
Yeah.
So he was just like not stoked. Let's put it that way. He was like, got a good grade, good for you. But like, I like didn't understand it at the time because I'm like, why isn't he so proud? You know, like I'm this cool person who speaks Russian fluently and I'm the only one in my grade, because this is not okay.
Yeah.
Like we also learned French poems. Like we learned Guillaume Apollinaire, Pont Mirabeau, right? And we didn't have the option of learning it in French. And if we had an option of learning it in French, would we have to learn it in French with no accent?
Right.
Like, would that be a thing?
No,
Because like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how would she know if we had an accent or not? And also, why would we be required to not have an accent in a foreign language?
Yeah.
Because Russian is a foreign language, especially if we're talking about Lviv. Like, nobody fucking speak Russian.
Yeah.
Like, at least pre, like, the Great Migration around Ukraine, right? And pre the invasion, like...
But it's funny that, like, you had Russian literature under foreign literature clause.
Yeah, and most...
In Mariupol, we had Ukrainian literature. We had Russian literature as a separate
we
topic.
didn't. No, we had...
And then we had foreign literature where
we had
зарубежная
literature.
and in London and
No.
But that is a form of abuse. That's good that you like it.
Yeah, it is abuse. It's like, why are you required as a Ukrainian child who has never learned Russian? It's not even a subject in our school. Like, we learned Ukrainian, German, and English.
You want to hear a crazier story? So I was studying in the Ukrainian school from first grade to up until the end of the 8th grade. And in Ukrainian schools, you are supposed to get physics class when you're in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And chemistry when you are in the 8th grade.
Something like that, yeah.
And we didn't have a Ukrainian-speaking teacher. So
It was in Russian.
No, I didn't have physics and chemistry at all.
Oh.
And then I moved to a different school where they would do everything in Russian.
Yeah.
And immediately they had physics and they had chemistry.
So you were hindered from learning.
Yeah, because
I was
there
just
weren't enough people.
The only bad grades when I was graduating were for physics and for chemistry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My one crazy experience, well, I've had a lot of crazy experiences on New York City subway L train. That's like, if you know, you know. But like, like L train is, I feel like, is just an experience in
Didn't
itself.
they close it for a year, right?
Well,
Or
it
like
was
a
like
long time?
quasi-closed.
Okay,
It was like closed on the weekends, and then it was like running one direction. It was hell. But anyways, it's back now.
Okay.
I think. I haven't been to New York in 7 months, it turns out. But so I'll be there in September if anyone needs anything from the US.
Yeah.
But so like...
Freedom?
Well, I mean, we're in the kind of predicament in the U.S. right now where like,
that's true.
But
We're waiting.
But we're re-energized, sort of like Kamala. You know, I love coconut trees, but so I was like on the subway and there was this guy sitting next to me, and I was with my dog, and he started like playing with my dog because she's adorable. She's a French bulldog. She knows what she's doing. She's like, and we started talking for some reason, and he was like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm Ukrainian," and he's like, "Oh," and it was like 2 stops before I had to exit and I was like running late, and I'm so mad that I was running late. But he was like, oh, that's really cool. So my grandfather is Polish and he was in a Nazi concentration camp with a lot of Ukrainians. Great people. He loves Ukrainians. And I was like, you tell me this as the doors to 8th Avenue are opening and I have so many questions. Like, who are you? Where can I find you? And we both just like, Misha, I was like sitting there. I was processing the information. He was like, well, it was great talking to you. And he like walked out and I'm like, dude, no, who are you? I wanted to make a TikTok video being like, if you were the dude on the L train today, I need to speak to you. And this was like in the beginning of the full-scale invasion too. So I was just kind of like, no.
Craigslist misconnections, maybe. You know?
Oh no.
It's like super random and super New Yorky at the same time.
Oh yeah. Super,
he was in a concentration camp with a bunch of Ukrainians. Great people. I'm like,
what are you working on next, and like where can we find you? Where can we, and I'm asking even as myself, like where can I look at more of your content?
So I mean, I have Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok as like my primary platforms. I do have like a Twitter. I will never call it X. Screw Elon Musk. But I don't know. Twitter is like a thing for me when like if something pops up that I feel like very opinionated on, like I will post there profusely, maybe for a week, and then I just abandon it for a month. So I wouldn't say it's a great platform to go find me. But like I'm consistent on Instagram. Oh my gosh, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, yes.
There's this word, yebanarium, that kind of sums up all the Twitter experience.
Yeah, it really is. It's like a mind fuck of no tomorrow times 55.
Your YouTube is really cool, by the way.
Thank you.
Link will be in the description. I was watching it to do research, but that's long form content is kind of difficult for younger generations, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, most of my YouTube following is like 40 plus, but I do news lives because I feel like sometimes, you know, especially Americans, like there's no reason for them to know like political dynamics in Europe or why certain politicians are saying this or that, or what their history with Russia is, because it's like it's so far away, right? Now it isn't, but in general it is. So I like to sort of, you know, have a discussion about that. And then you can hear me on United 24. I do Ukraine Briefly. That's a segment there about history and sort of like political things. And now I'm going to be working with UATV English, either on their channel The Gaze, or we might create a new channel. And I will have like two segments. One is going to be called sort of like Invisible Threats, and we're going to be talking with different speakers about their experiences of like how Russia is invading the West from within and we're just not seeing it. And Burning Questions, well, so it was supposed to be like a serious, you know, 30-minute segment about the news and how the Cold War never ended and how Russia like did invade the West politically and, you know, informationally and in cyberspaces and stuff. But I kind of put a twist on it yesterday because I was just sitting there and my next, like I recorded the pilot and then I'm writing a script for the first episode after the pilot, and it's about how Russia has had a really bad week in terms of information warfare because of Kamala Harris. And I was just like, I don't know if you guys have watched Love Island UK, but you've definitely heard of it, okay? Yeah. So there is this Scottish voice behind the scenes, and every single time there is like a new character introduced, he's like, and a bombshell entered the villa. And so I really wanted to use that for Kamala Harris entering the election. And so I realized that what we're going to do with this segment is it's going to be 30 minutes of like straight trolling with actual news.
Oh, cool.
So I want to like use pop culture references and stuff and explain
awesome.
Like how you know Russia's like cyber warfare has how the Cold War literally has always been going on, and we just like were taught to believe or fooled to believe that it wasn't.
And I think a lot of the future of a lot of people's perspectives and perception of what's happening right now rely on people like you. Now to tie back to Крапля Натхнення. I didn't honestly know that coming into this. I just knew that what you do is important work. But like who you are is more than a drop of inspiration, I think. And like I'm excited to meet you. I'm excited to
meet you guys.
Yeah, hang out with you more and discuss a lot more with you. Like it's really cool. I don't think this short of an episode could capture everything.
I think we all have a lot to say.
I'm super honored just to be sitting next to you.
Oh my god!
You talk because you're the one who followed through. Like I was in the beginning, like doing the stuff, but then kind of all the other projects.
I mean, life gets in the way.
But yeah, like you are like a true inspiration. That it's never too late to go back and continue to be that voice that's
I
out
think
there.
we need so many voices,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
like it's so good to like there shouldn't be like any pressure for you to think that you should be doing something, right? It's like life gets in the way. Like I had 2 years where I was living in the U.S. and this was the only thing that I could do, so I had all the time in my life to do it. I wasn't sitting in a bomb shelter. There weren't any air raids, right? Like I didn't have sleepless nights. I mean, I did, but for other reasons, and it was self-inflicted, right? But it's like, but I didn't go through any of the things that like Ukraine went through for like the first 2 years, right? I don't have relatives in the occupied territories. Like I'm as far as like all of this goes, it's like I'm very lucky because I'm from Lviv, and like and not lucky from Lviv in that sense, but like as in it's as safe as it gets. So it's sort of like I don't get to worry about my parents that much. I don't get to worry about all of these things, and I sort of moved here specifically to do this, right? So it's I think that every one of us is doing everything we can, and I think that every single like informational outreach and Ukrainians continuing working and like doing things and just living a life and like showing Russia that like you can't just break us is already doing a lot.
And life happens in the way that makes us connect.
Yeah.
I always believe that things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
But that's up to us to make something of it.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely need to link up more in the future.
Yeah. It's a great idea.
I mean, it's really amazing. I want to say, I hope the viewers find it amazing as we found inspiration in this conversation. I know here it's been really cool. Dima, thank you for helping me today with this
My pleasure.
jumping in, having these conversations.
Thank you for the cucumbers.
Oh yeah, let's not undermine those.
Let's
They
not
went quick.
Let's not gloss over the cucumbers.
Yulia, thank you for coming here and being with us. And not only that, thank you for coming from America to Ukraine and doing what you're doing right now. It's very important work.
Well, thank you for coming from America to Ukraine and doing what you're doing. And thank you for having me here. Yeah. And thank you for being here. And also, I love your mother.
Yeah, let's not undermine. Thanks, Dima's mother, by the way. Hopefully you're watching
Shout
this.
out Dima's mom
Please,
and her cucumbers.
Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, or not. It doesn't really matter. This is what matters. We're sharing a message, and thank you all. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.